and welcome to welcome to a special edition of the Phil and Dan Show. In fact, this is the only first ever edition of the Phil and Dan Show, and we thought it would be a good idea to get a discussion on around the future of the analyst industry. And I think with the upgrade to ChatGPT 5 this week, it was yet another reminder of how AI is going to have a huge impact, and already is having a huge impact on what's going to happen as we as analysts try and stay relevant and authentic. And you probably saw some fairly brash, brazen insights that we've been putting out on social media in the last few days, and we thought we'd chat a bit more about it. I mean, Dan, why do you think this industry is in trouble?
Well, so first step back, is this really the first time we recorded? Did we never do that before? I can't remember. Like, I feel like we talked before, but maybe we never actually hit the record button. We've had so many of those conversations that we're like, we should record this. And by the way, it's funny because it's probably been a year or two since the kind of first time we really did, and it's been the same. Like, we've been actually saying the same thing, and it's really been an interesting set of events because you could see the snowball forming, but it was like nobody felt like they lived at the bottom of the mountain. So we were just kind of watching it form. And it's like, you're like, well, you can plug in your thoughts and it writes like a really good, kind of report right back to you in real time. And you pick any topic. This morning I was on my podcast that I do with Pat, and I was like, we're going to debate Intel's future. And I actually, Phil, asked ChatGPT 5 to predict the winner of a debate. And between Patrick and I, and it gave me a full breakdown of the style and who would win, depending on how the debate was formed and what we were actually debating specifically and related to Intel. Came up with a great, it abstracted a visual of our debating styles. And so, I was on Fox Business yesterday, and ChatGPT was brought up, the launch. And I said, listen, this week I said Gartner is in trouble publicly. I've been saying privately. And I said, it's because companies that have tens of thousands of people doing jobs that agents can do are going to be in trouble. And so that doesn't necessarily mean the entire industry is at risk. But when you think about what we do, and inquiry, for instance, being one of the core tenets of what we do, inquiry becomes really easy to deliver with a prompt and an interface and a data set. And so you just look at the model and it just feels really, really broken. It's not just Gartner. It could be McKinsey. It could be Bain. It could be, any really company that's consulting, advisory, legal, where it's easier to chat than it is to set up a meeting 30 days into the future to get an answer that's rear looking, that's rear facing.
That's right. I mean, the way we're working is changing. And I think you mentioned McKinsey. I think their growth is down to 2%. I think the only consulting firm doing well right now is BCG at 9% growth. Everybody else is flat to negative. And you'd have thought consulting firms would be killing it in this market of change and need for security, cyber, everything around AI. But you kind of start to feel like we're in danger of becoming irrelevant. And another thing to look at here is the cost of actually accessing these platforms like OpenAI for the enterprise. It's not cheap. Companies are already spending millions on this a year to be able to have corporate-wide access to ChatGPT, for example, which everyone is using now. And so if you're a CFO, you're not going to think, oh, why are we still spending millions with Gartner and Forrester and these other companies when we're getting a lot of research done without needing them now? So I think the whole value proposition of the analyst is shifting quite quickly. And if you can't get ahead of it, we're going to have a lot of analysts on the job market in the next year or two. And no one's going to want these people. I hate to say it, but who needs an analyst? Unless you have a compelling brand, you have a network, you can deliver real value to your clients. There's a real issue emerging, and I'll go as far as saying no one's interested in content anymore. Content is, unless you are a absolute superstar rock god who can write very succinct stuff very quickly, No one wants to read stuff. People want to go to their social media. They'll go to podcasts. They'll talk to people, but go to conferences and stuff like that. But who wants to read reams and reams of boring content, about agentic and stuff like that? I just think we need to be realistic.
I think it's the approach, though. I think it's that content can be okay, but we have to think about the deflationary elements of generative AI and agents in terms of its creation. So you used to want to commission a report, and a report had a number of different value vectors for the buyer. First of all, subject matter expertise. Very difficult to have deep subject matter expertise because that's what analysts were special. They talked to tons of customers or they talked to tons of vendors. They were deep, and generally they had a background in the technology as well. You had things like the important customer data. So whether that's voice of customer, being out there, having the ability to talk to many customers, and then being able to succinctly summarize that and do something like an economic validation or a case study report. Then we just announced a partnership with G2. That's basically a fire hose of voice of customer data that now, instead of having to go out and get it, I have instantaneous fire hose right through our AI platform to pull that in. Then you look at things like, long for insight reports or research reports or whatever people write, Phil. And I mean, those things were like, it was as good as the brand that was on it. And it was as good as the scarcity of that kind of information. It's very much like what's happened in the equities market with like sell side reports. It's like Perplexity is so good now. It's like, do I need to read a sell side report? Do I need to pay for that research? And the point is, maybe, but only if there's really unique insights, proprietary data. The certain analyst that's writing the report is seen as super influential in that market and could potentially move the market by putting something out there. Otherwise, there's nothing. So I have this I'll give you this cascade because I'd like to hear what you think of it. But like, I basically got like this in our industry, there's like a law of most to least important contributions a firm like any of ours can have. And I mean, the number one contribution I still think is the true voice of customer. It's very unique. It's a small set of customer. You have it with your service provider business. This was something we'd been trying over years to build with a proprietary survey and data platform. We think that's still important, but it's lost its value in the agentic era and in the AI era. That's why we did this exclusive partnership with G2. We then think it's influence. So it's the next thing after the voice of customer, it's influence. And to your point, it's not, this is not a inconsequential thing. It's really having the ability to get a message out there, like having a measurable, provable ability to get your message out there. And then sitting underneath that is going to be your proprietary data, meaning what do you know that no one else knows? And then underneath it is maybe whatever research you put behind the wall that is better than data that exists out there in the free ethers of what's scraped by an LLM. And then underneath that, it's kind of all the other stuff you do, the advisory, I call it the unsolicited opinion of no-name people. Meaning that like that is like at the very bottom rung at this point of what people would want to pay for. Because if you can go to a chat app, and we've seen this with consumerization, Phil, in a chat app, if you can ask Amazon, where's my package? Will you pick up the phone and call? So you needed inquiry because you actually couldn't get the information in an easy way. Now you can. So why do you need it anymore? So basically it goes back to if you don't have something that they can't get off of free searches or free LLMs, you are probably already very close to obsolete, even if you don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's immediate information. I mean, if you go to HFS website, it's got Ask HFS right there. We agentified all our content, our video, our POVs, our Horizons reports, everything. And we've now got 4,000 research assets, which had to be tagged and identified so we could actually access this stuff. Just so our clients can go in and get the information they want really quickly, because they don't want to wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks to talk to an analyst and blah, blah, blah. They just need to know right now what's going on. So, Gartner, for example, they're going to have to do this to all these magic quadrants and all this other stuff they do. I mean, I'm sure they're going to try and come up with something. But the bottom line is the analyst industry is changing from this relationship on call model to something that's more instant, accessible information and insight. And they're not going to need as many people. And clients are asking questions on, why do I have to pay this tax? Why do I have to spend millions of dollars a year to access information? I can get a lot of this now. And
so I was asking, what do you think happens to AR? Because I mean, we're gonna get to what do you think happens to analyst firms, but I'm curious in your mind, like, is this a diminishing practice? Is it, because it was so much, I mean, so many of the AR programs I work with, a lot of their work is concierge. I mean, there's other work, but I mean, it's like getting the right execs with the right analysts, getting the right briefings to the right analyst groups. It's, supporting the events and making sure analysts come to events and get, the right tracks and get programmed to the right people. I mean, it's a major function. They're often worried about content, to your point, like what analyst is writing what content and making sure the right content is either created or amplified. I mean, is AR going to be a thing?
well, the whole point of AR was to sort of shepherd the analysts, be a concierge service between executives and analysts. And I don't think that's going to go away completely. But how many people do you need to look after one or two firms? And, a lot of these relationships are changing. I guess the question here is, what are these people going to do in the future? And it was AR used to be they used to represent the analyst, right? I remember 20 years ago, AR would call you up and they'd be like, how can we help you get what you need so you can make IBM or whoever you're covering look really good? Those people don't seem to exist anymore. It's much more reactive. It's much more political. It's sort of like you need one or two people to do this to make sure we look good in these reports. And if these reports start to lose relevance, right, I think the role of the AR really diminishes, because that's what they're there for, right? Executives get very upset if they're not in the right position in this quadrant or this wave or whatever we're talking about. And I think a lot depends on those. And I think these 2x2s are fading. And we've been talking about this we were talking about this 10 years ago, like, the magic quadrant. How long is this stuff going to keep lasting for? I know analyst firms, all they do is pump this 2x2 crap out week by week, and people don't care so much anymore. And the value of these reports isn't quite as strong as it used to be.
Well, it's interesting you say that. First of all, there's a lot of fundamental problems with the reports. And first of all, they're friction laden. Second of all, they're often adversarial. There's a ton of work that you need AR people to do to get these reports. And then there's a ton of work to be done to kind of negotiate your role in these reports after it's been determined. The reports aren't done using much technology underneath them at all. They tend to be done very manually. It's somewhat opaque, if not entirely opaque, how the process is determined in many cases. There's only a few firms that the evaluations really matter. And even worse than all of that is they tend to be rear facing or very much rear view, like 6 to 24 months in the past. So you have firms that are basically making deterministically what enterprise solutions or software or services you should buy and consume. They're looking backwards. And by the way, they're not using technology that they're trying to tell you to use to actually create these things. And then you need an entire team to just manage them. Like we, part of when we partnered with G2, and we're gonna, there'll be something we'll be talking about soon, but it's like these things need to be, and I know Gartner's kind of try to do something dynamic, but I have heard with mixed reviews. They need to be fully dynamic. They need to be generative and agentically based. They need to be able to digest immediately new information and insights. They need to have weights like a model does. They need to have prompts like a model does that basically can deterministically help people get much more precise. So, I mean, you might have an overall market positioning doc, and then you're probably going to want to have something that says like, well, who are you the person that's asking? So we can actually give you a evaluation that makes sense for you. Because the bottom line is like, yeah, the report maybe at a very high level adds some value, but I think a Substack probably adds more. I think a voice of customer, like having the ability to talk to 7 or 8 companies that are like you, that have detailed type of review data. And then, of course, the analyst insight layered onto that is great. And then the last thing I'd ask is like, who are these evaluations serving? Are we helping customers to buy? Are we helping vendors to promote? That whole model is super conflicted to me. It's kind of like a bank. You have a very strong firewall though in a bank between the market maker and the research. I don't think there was so much of a firewall there. Like it was like it was a two-sided trade with no firewall. Um, and I think that's also problematic.
Yeah, well, I mean, people are buying differently, right? Now, I think there was a lot of fear about Gartner. Basically, if you were a supplier and you didn't spend enough money with them, you didn't pay enough money to brief their analysts, you wouldn't do as well in their 2x2s. And the same if you're a CIO or CIO minus one or two, you needed to have your Gartner relationship so you could justify purchases and go to their conferences and all this sort of stuff. I just think the technology is changing really quickly. And I think the analyst firms are struggling to stay up with it now. I mean, ChatGPT is now like mainstream media news. Like everyone's talking about it. Do you really need to talk to an analyst to understand what ChatGPT 5 is doing? You don't. You go straight online. I saw about 10 reviews today of people using every angle of ChatGPT 5 possible for free. And people are very, very willing to just share their entire experiences of reading. Ethan Mollick, great guy, one of the most knowledgeable people I know around using these applications. And Azim Azhar, some of these people putting out fantastic insights. Why do you need to go to Gartner and other analyst firms anymore? You don't.
I think it's ultimately in what what they know, and this is where they have value. I mean, and not just any firm that has deep proprietary, unique access and insights that can synthesize that and make it digestible and usable in a decision. Okay. And so basically that wipes out 80-90% of this industry. Because I mean, let's be really candid. Like I've spent millions of dollars and invested, taking tons of risk to try to get to a point where we had something unique. And not everything I've done has worked. I mean, I'm not arrogant enough to suggest that every acquisition I've made has been a great one or every person I hired has worked out. But in building Future AI, over 2 years ago, we announced it. I saw this end before it started. It was very clear to me instantaneously. Like I'm a millennial. I could see the way I want to talk to people. I'm like, and then, I kind of figured out where do you lean in, and it's basically there's three vectors by which we as firms sort of have influence. You influence the vendors slash service providers, kind of where you strength, right? I influence end customers and buyers, where really only Gartner in this industry has significant weight. I mean, there's a few others that tinker, ISG does a little bit. And then there's markets, which is more of my innovations, which was when we focused really in on the equities markets through the lens of industry. Meaning, there's been little bits of that throughout. I think we've sort of platformed that idea of doing that. But my point is like that's what people care about. It's either an investor that wants to know should they buy the stock, or it's a IT buyer that wants to know should they buy the stuff, or it's a vendor wanting to know how do our other vendors see us and how do those other two groups that I just mentioned see us, right?
Right.
And so really, what do you have of value? And that's really the interesting question. And then, of course, how fast can you move? And that's the other one, because I think Gartner has a lot of the first part. What do they have of value? They have a lot of data. They have millions of briefings that they've done over years. They have these events where customers still show up. I mean, there's value in that art infrastructure, but they can't move. They're paralyzed in terms of the speed. Like they've been talking about kind of an AI product for 3 years. How do you launch something like HFS AI or Futurum AI that would basically replace thousands of nameless, faceless analysts? They have the problem, Phil, that large law firms have right now. That they're the ones that are getting rid of paralegals and first and second year associates and the people that kind of can do all that because all that stuff's already trained into models. And so now it's very top heavy, meaning your most influential analysts, your most influential sales executives don't have all the great relationships and insights, probably still have value, the 20-80, the 20% of the 100. But then you have one other fundamental problem, Phil, is in the future, how do you get people from zero to that level? This is the one interesting thing, because eventually we all age out. And so, we'll all age out and retire. I put a tweet out earlier. I said, will Jensen Huang be the first CEO that embodies himself in AGI, creates a humanoid with AGI, and he'll run NVIDIA for the next, 1,000 years. Because basically, that's where we are. I mean, we're at a level where right now you could take Phil AI, Dan AI, you could train it on a model. You could make a really good one just using public info. I did it today using GPT-5. I asked it questions. I told it to make it sound like me. Then on top of that, though, you take all your content that's your proprietary research, your data, your insights, what you know that's in your head and in your data set. We can make a model of ourselves and we can make it available to our customer at scale for, ChatGPT is 200 a month. So what are we worth? 10? But the point is like, that's already here. And that's not even with AGI.
That's right. I would argue AGI is here. I think it's here now because I can rely more on ChatGPT than I can on people for a lot of things now.
Definitely,
I really can.
If we're kind of trying to figure out these, I think Sam wants it to be AGI to get out of that Microsoft pickle he's in. But we're definitely, by the way, just a quick point on that. Elon Musk said something along the lines, he responded to a Satya tweet yesterday about basically OpenAI, how Microsoft is basically screwed. And when you think about that, my head started spinning. The first thing I said is, how's that possible? Because Microsoft has had OpenAI so spun up in the deal term. But the only thing I could think of is Elon realizes that they're much closer to AGI, because that's where the deal ends, is at AGI, right? At AGI, OpenAI gets to do their own thing, but who the heck determines when we've actually reached it?
That's right. That's right. We're really dealing with the mass commoditization of information. And these tools have enabled us to use everything out there in a far more sophisticated manner than we've ever done before. And we're going to be working in smaller companies in 3 to 5 years. I think companies are going to be much more about smaller groups of people using technology in a very smart way. And I just think big, clunking legacy businesses just can't survive at this pace. I work in the service industry. I work with companies like TCS, who have 600,000 people. Accenture has 830,000 people. It's insane how big these companies are. And the bottom line is they're not going to keep hiring more and more people now. They're all thinking, how do we do more with less? And these tools are starting to enable companies to do that, but can they move quick enough? And Gartner's in the same spot. Right? How can they become more nimble? How can they be quicker and slicker and better at what they do? They've got a great brand, but if they don't, I think, reinvent themselves pretty quickly, their brand will go stale. We've seen this with so many tech firms as well. Like, they were once great brands. Look at Forrester. They were a fantastic brand 10 years ago, and now they're the laughing stock of the industry. So
yeah, they have a sub 200 million market cap now.
Wow.
I mean, complete capitulation. And of course, you saw what Gartner shed 40% of its market cap in a week. And that was it wasn't even terrible numbers. It was just that the market couldn't believe, one, that they missed, because they never miss. It's so predictable. Two is, when the federal government starts pulling back, that's really bad. And of course there was Doge and some of these things, but that tends to be the laggard in terms of making changes in decision making. And then of course, I really do think people wanted it to be about the defense spending. I think it was about the fact that they're starting to just very clearly see, the day before the Wall Street Journal published the article about McKinsey, they're just starting to see that it just doesn't scale. I mean, I genuinely think when Sam Altman talked about the one-person billion-dollar ideas and companies, he wasn't far off as to what AI will be able to do and the small number of people that it will be required to scale this kind of business. And so in the end, I'm very certain what has value. I don't know what the long tail is on these diminishing assets value, meaning I still see things that we're talking about that aren't important or no longer should be because of AI being done and money being spent on them. And, I still see a lot of AR people running really fast, trying to deal with Quadrants and supporting their executives' whims when it comes to not being happy about what dot and where it was placed. But in reality, I think this has 18 months or less to look anything like it does. And I mean, I've never seen change at this rate. I've studied it for 2 decades. I've written 7 books about digital transformation. I wrote a book called Human Machine that literally explored this exact concept. But I think we are at an amazingly exciting moment, Phil. But I also think we're in this incredibly difficult inflection. And most of the people I talk to have, I don't mean this cynically, but have their head in the sand. I mean, first of all, when I said I made a comment about disrupting the industry in 75 days, and I got some blowback, uh, usual suspects, but like, these people completely are of the mind and the belief that the way it's always been done is the way it'll always be done. And or that the companies that were successful in the last era will be successful in the next era. And by the way, Kodak thought that, BlackBerry thought that, Blockbuster thought that, Intel thought that. There's a lot of companies that have been proof points that we in this industry should know better. Um, and frankly, I also think there's a lot, like I said, a lot of AR people and teams that by the way, you love this because you work with service providers. It's like people that were VMware or SAP certified or Salesforce trailblazers. They have created an entire career and worldview around this certification and skill they have. And
Yeah.
so you ask a CEO about, well, why are you not seeing more change in the enterprise? Well, the people in IT and in the technology that run all the company's systems are going to basically tell you at every corner that the system and the complexities and why they're so important in keeping I think there's a risk of AR following that same pit of like, no, this is really important. And we did a study to say how important this particular evaluation thing is. And I mean, AR is not going to come to the bosses and be like, yeah, we're obsolete. We're not needed anymore. Uh, uh, you know, so what do they do? And I like to get your take on this. I have some ideas, but I actually think fundamentally, um, AR departments have to start disrupting themselves the way companies like ours are. I mean, I'm willing to completely blow up my business model and make massive investments to protect the fact that if I don't have a business in probably less than 2 years.
Yeah. Look, I think our industries, the analyst industry in particular, and the consulting industry, I think this is our blockbuster moment. And I hate that. I hate the word blockbuster because it's such a legacy description, but it really is.
Kodak
Um,
moment.
the kind of moment, I'll call it the Stephen Colbert moment. Like, I'm
Ooh,
sorry, I watched his show the other day just because of all that fuss about him getting cancelled. And I'm like, I do not want to sit through 30 fucking minutes of commercials and shit just to hear one interview, right? And I go to Instagram, I can get the highlights of his show in a minute, and I'm done, right? And then they wonder why he's being cancelled because they spend like, what was it? It's like $40 million plus a show. The cost of producing this stuff is insane. These are examples where people just consuming information in a completely different way, and the whole nature of the analyst industry is under massive threat because of it. It really, and we're being honest. And the people who are pontificating about who's next to be disrupted are the ones who are probably going to be disrupted the most. And you talk about AR, it's like, hey, they need to stay relevant, and they need to you got to accept what's happening and figure out the way forward. Like you've got to find your path. You've got to figure out how do we stay relevant to our clients. Not everybody's going to be our client in a year. Industries changing, right? We're not as relevant as we used to be. So you got to figure out how to stay ahead. And a lot of it's down to being authentic because, I have read so much crap in the last 6 months, which I know is written half by ChatGPT. And I freaking hate it. It drives me nuts. I see the M dashes, I see the stupid little bullet points and things and the generic language. And I'm like, the minute I suspect someone's using this shit, I don't even want to read it. I don't want to read it. And I've seen it everywhere.
well, it's
And
also bad prompting. I mean,
yeah,
frankly, I mean, I've learned this. I have a great CTO that's built our back end platform because a lot of the language in your platform, it's all open source, right?
Yeah.
And then you add the proprietary data of all your stuff that you've made it so your AI can give good answers. But the way you ask a question is critical. And the reason I'm saying that is because I notice a lot of because I see what you see. Like, look, first of all, it's kind of one of these, we're in this paradox right now because it's like I tell my team, like, if you don't use AI, you're going to move too slow and you're going to make us obsolete. We should be able to do things faster. If you do use AI, though, it actually has to sound like you, look like you, be like you, and be, good. It can't be shitty. And where you fit in the middle is like the way you ask a question, the way you prompt it, the data you feed it. Because I think you said this to me when we talked, and you said you've read some stuff like that you get back from even your own team, and you're kind of asked that, is this AI, right? And I think you see in the end, I think it's going to be a blend. It's got to be what's in their head coupled with the speed of the technology to get insights out faster. Because part of the problem with our industry too is it takes us a month to put anything out. So ChatGPT 5 comes out. How long before real analysis hits the market? Because for the last 4, 5, 6 years, guys like you and me in this industry have been semi-disruptive. We won't give ourselves full credit, or I won't, because we use social media to sort of put our instant commentary out. We do broadcast and podcast, but we also are just constantly, right? You're on LinkedIn all the time, just blowing people up. That's what you do. You've got an opinion, it gets out there quickly. You put your blogs out on, so, and my point is like speed has been one of your differentiations. It's certainly been one of mine. AI enables speed. So it's kind of like, what do analysts do? Do you have them use the tool, go fast, Phil? Do you have them not use the tool? Do they use the tool but add their own wares to it? And even if that's good enough now, in the future, like to do this right, don't we have to cover like thousands of things every day with relevance and influence to really still have a product someone would want to pay for?
Yeah. I mean, I'm all about speed, because it's like when I know this with analysts as well. Good analysts, when they write stuff, they want to get it out quickly. And the worst thing is to have this archaic editorial department which is going to sit on things and question this and that and didn't quite get. I actually like reading something now with a freaking spelling mistake or a grammatical problem, because I know it's fucking authentic. Who cares? I used to
Read
when I
my
was
Twitter.
blogging 10 years ago, I'd get people criticizing me for making grammatical errors and things. And I'd say, this is great. I crowdsource my spell check because you're all emailing me saying, hey, you got this wrong, you got this wrong. But it's about speed. It's about being authentic. It's about creating an authentic voice for yourself. And I think one of your guys, Dan O'Brien, said to me, it's not what you say, it's who's saying it. That's important now. And that's what analysts have to do to be relevant, is build an aura around yourself. And people are never going to agree with 100% of what you say. And you're going to contradict yourself occasionally. But build yourself an authentic voice that people are willing to pay to access. They're willing to, they want to hear from you. And that's my advice to AR as well. Build a personality that everyone wants. I'm going to call IBM. I'm going to call this Warren guy. I really like him. He's a good guy. He listens to me. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, part of this is we have to really focus on our personal brands, our authenticity, our relationships, our humanness is what's going to get us through this. And so how can you be human when you're, I don't know how big Gartner is these days, 5 billion, 6 billion? I lose track. But
You'd ask ChatGPT 5.
yeah, how can you maintain that human element when you're that big? And I feel sorry for them, because it's like it's almost impossible.
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree on the authenticity piece. I think anyone that reads my social would pretty much agree that I'm the genuine article. Few people don't, but I don't really care. The net though, I think, is also like you do have to be willing to acknowledge that the old business model isn't the future business model. Like I've done that since I started. Like literally in this business, I came into like I really had been in IT for a decade, and I really didn't know what an analyst was because I was on the VAR side. We weren't a massive VAR, so we weren't getting called on even by an HFS. We didn't have, and when I came up, and I'm like, so basically, an analyst is some hybrid of a consultant, an influencer, a media personality, a pundit, an author. It's like this amalgamation of all these behaviors, right? But ultimately, an analyst is someone that could understand and synthesize. And one of the specialties that we had that AI is so good at is taking a complex idea and making it digestible, because you can prompt it that way. Explain to me quantum mechanics in a way that an eighth grader can understand. And it will explain it that way. Like humans, and by the way, a lot of analysts suck at doing that. They Everything is all about it's a flex, right? How smart are you? It's the same problem
Yes.
engineers have. It's the reason a lot of engineers are never CEOs is because CEOs are the C students, as George W. Bush would say, that could just make a really hard thing simple. I mean, you can like or not like President Trump, but he speaks in a language that very layman people can understand. Like
Yeah.
the biggest, the great, like that's what people can relate and understand. When I go on TV, people are often like, why do they bring you on TV? And again, we have a litany of arguments about whether I should be, whether I'm any good at it, but I do it a lot. Okay. And one of the things that I think is really important is speaking in a way that the people that watch it can understand. The investors that watch on CNBC aren't the technical people that sit in rooms with us and AI and talk about AI or talk about quantum or talk about cloud computing. So you have to take something very complicated and make it digestible and understandable. And by the way, most people, even that are technically capable, appreciate speaking at that level more of the time. AI does that very
Yeah.
well. So, let me give a couple recommendations because this could become a 7 hour long Joe Rogan-esque style podcast, and we don't want to do that to all of you. We do hope you found this enjoyable. Um, uh, um, First of all, for AR, I think it's your turn. It's time to start. A lot of our firms, like my firm and Phil, your firm, have been disruptors over the years, and I think you've enjoyed the benefit of having some diversification. I've had plenty of people say we needed an alternative. I won't say to who, but I think you can figure it out. We need other options. And again, as influence grew, as social media grew, things like the ability to reach audiences at scale, whether it was investors, whether it was service providers, whether it was end customers, have been valuable. And then, of course, being measurable, like the work we do can be measured because we do so much of it in a forum that's measurable. We don't just drop a PDF on your desk for some absorbent amount of money and say, good luck. I think you got to start thinking about how you disrupt. I mean, I ended up hiring Dan O'Brien, as a CEO of my company. Um, and one of the things when I worked with him at IBM, he took a shot on us in terms of like, he saw the momentum that we had in media and press, and he basically kind of put us into this executive track, built a rapport between us and Arvind Krishna, their CEO. And what I'm saying is he took a chance on influence. He took a chance and said, I see something different in terms of where analysts other than Gartner at the time really provide value. And it was in his mind, it was influence. And so I've seen some companies and vendors have more success by leaning harder into that as opposed to just evaluation as an alternative. I mean, smaller programs tend to always say, well, we just focus on the big three. Well, honestly, it's not big three anymore. It's really the big one. And if you look at what happened this last week, it's maybe the big zero in the near future because the big, if it's just counting numbers and it's just inquiry, a lot of that stuff at scale is available through a API into G2 and a $200 a month deep research subscription. So that's another thing you have to think about. So what's the value? And so, you heard my value chain, and any of you want to talk more about it, text me, send me a message or a LinkedIn. Happy to chat. And for us, Phil, I mean, look, I think why we get on, despite the fact that we don't really compete, but we compete. We at least compete for mind share. Whether it's actually the same people, in the sense that we're both have that kind of profile. We're trying to say big things and kind of keep people on their toes. And there's only so much time in a day they can spend thinking about anyone. So we're hoping they're thinking about us. But like, I think your idea of authenticity is great, but you do have to build a material influence platform, both as an individual and as a company if you're an analyst or a firm. Because in the end, like the idea of there's so much said. AI has created this environment where exponential content is being created. And by the way, it's not just written, it's going to be video. You got Notebook LM, it'll create podcasts, it'll create shorts, video shorts and reels. And in the future, you'll be able to program into a robot, someone that could sit in the room with you and play your executive advisor. I think someone sells executive advisor services. I could program a robot that has more experience as a CIO than the one they're going to sell you for however much a month. And it can sit next to you and you can ask it questions. You have to have something as an analyst that stands out and stands above the noise.
Right.
I think those are the two things. And, I do believe you have to embrace AI. You have to embrace it. You're going to have to democratize things that you used to sell and make it almost free, and then figure out where your new value layer is. And we certainly think it's going to have a lot more to do with these companies need help predicting the future, not necessarily as much help anymore seeing the past. And that's, I think, where we can provide a lot.
That's absolutely right. And I think you hit the nail on the head with analysts need to build an influence platform for themselves. And the problem you have in a faceless company like Gartner is the influence platform. It's not the analysts. And now this is coming back to bite them because clients want to hear from, as we said, people who have influence, people who are authentic. And the human model is taking over. And that's why much smaller companies like ours can battle our way through what's a choppy market. We're growing at 20% this year. We grew at 30% last year. Even though the market's tough out there, because we're small, we can flip, we can move, we can build, we can bring in the right people, we can make decisions. And I hired someone today and he couldn't believe, I figured out his salary and all this sort of stuff within like 2 hours. He's like, how the hell do you do that? I said, well, helps I run the company. But we move fast. And you've got to be nimble in this market. And I think big and stodgy is the recipe for a disaster. And I think it's many industries. This is happening.
Yeah, the big firms, whether it's in our direct or in advisories, consulting, legal, look, they're going to be fine, but they have to get small enough, fast enough. And I'm a bit unapologetically one of those people that wants to run the company lean. We've grown to nearly 100 FTEs. And I've pulled back in some places because, like I said, I want to scale with technology, not people. It's not personal, but this is the same. I'm listening. You and I have this luxury of talking to a lot of CEOs, talking to a lot of execs of big companies. That's what they're doing. I mean, I'm taking a cue at times from some of the smartest people in the world. And I've heard by the way, some of the most bullish CEOs with growth companies that are basically saying in the era of AI, our headcount expansion is going to slow down dramatically because so much of the work that's being done. So, if you and I, and hopefully I say this on both of our behalf, we can add any real value. It's also about helping those out there in AR and other analysts out there that want to stay relevant. I hope you listen to this because every day I wake up and I think about that exact thing. How do I keep myself? How do we keep the firm relevant? How do we do it in a way that's thoughtful, provocative, but kind and empathic? And how do you make meaningful impacts and differences for the clients that you serve? Meaning, help drive them to an outcome that adds value, and do it in a way that's positive. I see a lot of adversarial behavior in this industry, and we certainly don't have to agree, like vendors and I, on how their companies and how their products stack up, but everything can be done in a way that doesn't have to feel like you're on X having a debate about President Trump or your opinion of Elon Musk. And so another thing I really pride myself on is, in a world of people hiding behind avatars and stuff, is stay humble, stay kind.
Yeah, stay humble, stay kind, and stay nimble. I think that's the message from this conversation. And wake up to reality and realize the world's changing around you.
Well, we'll keep talking, everyone. And we're gonna put this out in social. We're putting our best selves out, and this is pretty raw. Like we did this. We didn't prep it. We didn't say this. We just basically agreed that we wanted to go on the record because we think that a lot of the people in this industry, we know it from the posts that we've had and the engagement it's created. I shared something this week. It had almost 100,000 eyes on the post about the sell-off of Gartner and in the market and my perspective on where it's going. And we want to, I always say, when you get where you're going, I said humble and kind, the same song. When you get where you're going, turn back around. We've been very blessed. I think you and I could agree with the reception we've had in this industry, the opportunity we've had to make an impact, and the people we've had a chance to work with. And we both want to see it succeed. Like neither of us, we seem cynical, but it's because we're watching it. And in my case, I'm saddened to see the lack of urgency and pace. And so, I'm willing to give time and commitment to an industry that's provided me a wonderful life and a set of unbelievably great experiences. And I hope people out there let's make sure we keep talking, and Phil, let's make sure
Yeah,
we keep giving back, because I think that's
yeah.
important.
I mean, I do this because I enjoy it, and I'm paid to learn in my job, and as you are, and it's a privilege, and I want to keep doing it. If I stop enjoying it, I'll shut up shop and do something else. But it's a privilege to be in the analyst industry and do it in a way that gets you up in the morning and getting other people excited and passionate. And this is a difficult time. I was going through the ChatGPT 5 stuff the last couple of days, and it actually filled me with dread. I was like, this is so fucking good, this technology. It's getting better and better so quickly. We have to adapt so fast to stay relevant and keep our businesses profitable as we evolve, because I've never seen technology move as fast as it is right now.
And it'll never move as slow as it is right now either. I think that's a great place to cut this off. But let's definitely keep talking. Love to hear from y'all in comments and in the threads if you've listened all the way to the end here. I think it got better and better, so hopefully you stuck with us. But
Oh,
we'll keep chatting. Phil Fersht, HFS CEO. I'm Daniel Newman, in case you don't know who I am, and I'm founder CEO of Futurum, and we have semi-competitive and complementary businesses in the advisory and research space, and we also find a common bond and passion about trying to drive this industry forward. So keep in touch with us, and if you like it, let us know. And heck, maybe we'll do it again in 3 months when everything's completely different.
absolutely. Great chatting.